Joe Gibbs says it's not fun competing against Kyle Busch, and Gray Biffle is interested in returning to NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start by talking about Australia, as there was a report by Adam Stern that NASCAR has a new merchandise licensee in Australia with streetwear brand T&E creating a NASCAR collection for Universal Store. This is really cool to see that the NASCAR is expanding their presence out to Australia. Obviously, there's a lot of motorsports fans in the Australian area, and a lot of people have been interested in NASCAR across the globe. So it's really cool to see that NASCAR is expanding their global presence, and really cool to see that they have new licensee merchandise deals in Australia. Really exciting stuff to see. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Andre Castro. As it was announced on Friday morning that Andre Castro will drive for Jesse Wuji Motorsports later this year and make his debut, or attempt to make his debut, at the Chicago Street Course. Jesse Wuji Motorsports only made a few starts so far in the 2023 season, as they have been in the Xfinity Series a lot less due to not having a lot of sponsorship and a lot of funding. Andre Castro, I believe, comes from the European Series, so it's really cool to see. He's also, of course, from New York, I believe, but it's really cool to see that Andre Castro is getting an opportunity and a shot to make his debut. I know Jesse Wuji Motorsports has not really high expectations for that team. Nonetheless, though, I think it is a really cool and really great opportunity for Andre Castro. Hopefully, he can do a really good job and run really good in the Chicago Street Course, and hopefully he can make the show. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Greg Vanoss. As it was reported by Colby Evans, also known as Arca Start and Park Car, that unfortunately Greg Vanoss, after the crash at Charlotte, will not race at Berlin this weekend. This is really unfortunate story. If you watched the Arca race at Charlotte, you saw the wreck between Connor Mosack and Greg Vanoss. Connor Mosack got way too impatient. Unfortunately, wrecked a really good car for Greg Vanoss. And because Greg Vanoss is a small team owner and doesn't have the funding and sponsorship and does have a lot of wrecked cars, he, unfortunately, because of all the wrecked cars, cannot race. It's really an unfortunate story because Greg Vanoss had such a promising start to the season when he went on to win at Daytona, one of the most emotional victories and incredible victory moments he has ever had. But he's going to get the opportunity to drive Falcon Prime Racing later this year in Atlanta, but it's just a shame to see this because Greg Vanoss got wrecked by someone who was way too impatient, way over their head. We've seen a lack of respect on the racetrack, and it's such a shame. I know that Venturi tried to help him, and I don't think Connor Mosack's the worst driver in the world, but God, that kid has got, actually Joe Gibbs Racing, I think it was. It's just so unfortunate to see a driver get completely screwed by someone not using their head and not using their brain. I wish drivers had a lot more respect, and sadly nowadays drivers don't have as much respect anymore to get situations like this. Nonetheless, it's a really unfortunate story, and it sucks to see that Greg Vanoss will not race at Berlin this weekend. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Zane Smith. As it was reported from Brock Beard that Zane Smith is expected to drive for RSS Racing next weekend at Nashville in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. We have seen Zane Smith make some cup starts so far with Front Row Motorsports. I think he's also made a start with Rick Ware Racing. And we've also seen Zane Smith run full-time in the Truck Series the last few years. Of course, he's defending NASCAR Truck Series champion. And of course, he's in the championship conversation once again in 2023 with already 2 wins this season. Now, Zane Smith, I think this is a really great opportunity for him. I believe this is going to be the same car that Eric Almirola just ran, and we saw how good Eric Almirola ran. He just won his first Xfinity Series race in like 4 or 5 years, so that was really cool to see Eric Almirola get that victory done. But like I said, this is a really great opportunity and a great shot for Zane Smith to get some experience in Xfinity. I think he would learn a lot more racing Xfinity than racing trucks, but it's very likely that next year Zane Smith is going to be in the Cup Series, whether it's Front Row or Stewart-Haas Racing. I'm not really sure. What I'm intrigued to see by long term is what other drivers could drive this car, because we've seen a lot of different drivers like Eric Almirola and Zane Smith. Maybe they'll bring someone up like a Ty Majeski, maybe Haley Deegan. She gets some more Xfinity Series starts. I said this, that she needs to have some more Xfinity Series starts, because I think she will do better if she gets more Xfinity Series starts, because she had a pretty impressive debut last year in Las Vegas, driving the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing. And I believe that if you gave her an opportunity with RSS Racing, I think she learned a lot better. That being said, though, it's a really good opportunity for Zane Smith, and I think Zane Smith will be very competitive and have a chance to be up front. We're looking forward to see what Zane Smith can do with RSS Racing. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, over the weekend, a story that kind of went under the radar was a story around the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was reported by Adam Stern that Jacksonville Jaguars have begun discussions about the possibility of using a racetrack, Daytona International Raceway racetrack, as a temporary stadium for the NFL team for 2 years as it renovates TIAA Bank Field. Obviously, Jacksonville Jaguars team is going to be trying to find a place to play their games for the next 2 seasons as they are going to be renovating their stadium. This is absolutely a huge story. Now, if the NFL, Jacksonville Jaguars do end up playing at the Daytona International Speedway, this would not be the first time. I believe the NFL back in the 1950s and the 1960s did play at that stadium, so it would not be the first time. But if they were able to do this, Daytona has a lot of stands, but I don't think they'd be able to be filled up. But you know some people, especially NASCAR fans, will go out there and check out the Jacksonville Jaguars games wherever they're playing because you have a lot of people who are opposed because the Jaguars, let's be honest, have been a team that kind of struggled long term and are a team that really doesn't make it far into playoffs usually. But it is really interesting to see that the Jacksonville Jaguars are in conversations to do this. Honestly, I think it'd be really cool for them to play in the stadium. It'd be really, really fun. It would be really, really amazing. And hopefully there is a chance and an opportunity that we do end up seeing this happening. So we'll see what happens going forward. But it sounds like Jacksonville Jaguars are in conversations to do this. This is really, really cool. Did not expect to be talking about an NFL team on this channel. But really cool to see the Jacksonville Jaguars are in conversations with NASCAR currently about this happening. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Cindric and Austin Dillon. Now, if you watch a Cup Series race at Gateway, you saw what happened between Austin Cindric and Austin Dillon, where there was an incident on the racetrack about 20 or 19 laps ago. Austin Dillon came up the racetrack and basically ended up wrecking himself, and Cindric came down just a little bit and misjudged it just a little bit, but Austin Dillon basically ended up wrecking himself. Austin Dillon told the media after getting out of the infield care center that he believes that Austin Cindric should have ended up being suspended. Well, we know for sure that was not the case. He did not intentionally wreck him. Obviously, I think Austin was trying to get a little bit of attention, considering the fact that we saw what happened with Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin, where we saw Chase Elliott get suspended because of that. Now, obviously, Austin Cindric, I think he talked to the media and spoke to the media once again a day or two ago, and he actually says that he and Austin did have a conversation. They decided to go ahead and agree to disagree. Now, look, in the situation with Austin Cindric and Austin Dillon, Austin Cindric basically did nothing wrong, in my opinion. He's basically stayed straight. If he did any movement, it was a very slight movement, but if he did any, it was very, very slight. I don't think Austin Cindric intentionally wrecked Austin Dillon. For Austin basically to call out Austin Cindric like that, I think was ridiculous and unacceptable. I understand Austin was frustrated and upset that he got wrecked, but I think it was Austin Dillon's fault because you can clearly see Austin Dillon goes up the racetrack and basically gets into Cindric himself, yet he decided to go ahead and blame Cindric. In my opinion, I think the fault goes down to Austin Dillon. He should have used his mirrors and should have used his head a little bit and been a little more patient. I know it's near the end of the race, but he should have been a little more patient. That being said, though, I'm glad to see that both drivers were able to talk to each other. It sounds like maybe they're hopefully both on good terms, agree to disagree, and glad they finally were able to have a conversation and move on from the situation. Now they both can focus on trying to make the playoffs. Cindric and Dillon have both struggled so far in the 2023 season, so hopefully, and maybe just maybe, they can perform a little better this season and focus on that front. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Josh Balicki versus Ty Dillon. Now, if you watch a NASCAR Cup Series race at Sonoma Raceway, you saw that Josh Balicki got turned around. But Fox never talked about how Josh Balicki, or even showed a replay on how Josh Balicki got turned. Well, according to Texachev on Twitter, there were 2 times where Ty Dillon basically got into drivers. The first driver I believe he got into was either Ty Dillon or Eric Almirola, and then he got into the other driver. Well, Josh Balicki was not happy with Ty Dillon and basically called him a hack. Now, Ty Dillon, like I said, drove like an idiot near the end of this race. He basically dive bombed twice, and we had not seen a lot of drivers dive bomb corners and get into people. Obviously, we had the Ryan Blaney situation, but Ryan Blaney was not having any of it with the media. But obviously, when you look at the Josh Balicki and Ty Dillon situation, Ty Dillon should have used his head a little bit. You kind of ruined a good day for Josh Balicki. He at least could be for top 25 or maybe even a chance at a top 20. He's had pretty good pace and pretty good speed, especially in practice and qualifying. But he basically got turned by Ty Dillon for no freaking reason. Ty Dillon should have just used his head. And obviously, Ty Dillon, he had his best race of the season, finishing 23rd, being up front consistently. But Ty Dillon has had a terrible year with Spire Motorsports. And I think a lot of people do feel like that Ty Dillon has basically used up his time in NASCAR and probably should basically either go back down the Xfinity and race there or basically should just retire in general because it's frustrating to see Ty Dillon do things like this when he's in the back of the pack on a week-by-week basis. Meanwhile, Josh Biffle gets opportunities and shots. He ends up getting turned for no reason. It was just really, really frustrating to watch. I feel like Ty Dillon should have used his head a little bit, and I personally do not blame Josh Biffle for being upset and being frustrated with Ty Dillon in that situation. I don't blame him for being frustrated. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about New Orleans. As Alvin Kamara was basically speaking to media and Front Stretch got an interview with him, and Alvin Kamara says that NASCAR should work to go ahead to New Orleans. This is very, very interesting considering Alvin Kamara plays for the New Orleans Saints. He's from the New Orleans area and basically has played there for a long time. Now, obviously, New Orleans is a market that I don't think NASCAR has really explored, but we have seen motorsports explore the New Orleans area. Look at IndyCar back in 2015, they raced at NOLA, which of course was a motorsports park. They only ran there 1 year. They tried to get back in 2016, but they were not able to get back to the racetrack after that due to lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. It would be really cool to see NASCAR expand to New Orleans, but I don't think that's going to be their main focus going forward. But I really would love to see NASCAR expand their presence down to New Orleans. New Orleans does have quite a few fans down in that area. It kind of expanded that Gulf area where there aren't a lot of tracks kind of NASCAR goes to kind of near that Gulf area. So it'd be really cool to see New Orleans get a shot and an opportunity to be raced at. Will it happen? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, it's very interesting to see that Alvin Kamara is kind of calling for NASCAR to go to New Orleans. It would be really, really cool and honestly really fun to see NASCAR try to go there. It'd be really fun to see. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox Sports. Now, Mike Joy put out a tweet apologizing and clarifying what happened basically in the Fox Sports booth when he basically said Kamara Trick was the oldest winner and actually kind of messed it up and apologized for that, which honestly, we all make mistakes. But Mike Joy says something in this tweet that really caught a lot of attention and caught my eye. He says, of course, they're going to have him, Mike Joy, Clint Boyer, and Kevin Harvick in the booth next year. And there's going to be an occasional four-man booth at times throughout the 2024 season. That is very, very interesting. So my big question is, who is going to be in the Fox Sports booth during that time? I would imagine that there's going to be normal people. You're probably going to see Kurt Busch in the Fox Sports booth at some point if Kurt does not come back by this time next year. I imagine Kurt Busch, he's going to get an opportunity. What about Carl Edwards? Carl Edwards did a very good job at Darlington, brought a lot of great analysis for a guy who had not been basically in the sport for 7 years. He did an amazing job. Seems like he came back, and it felt like he had never left. Tony Stewart obviously would probably be a guest they're probably going to end up bringing back, I'd imagine, because Tony did a lot of commentary. He may end up being a guest as well. Maybe they bring someone else in like Danica again, or maybe Jamie McMurray gets an opportunity to be in the booth a lot more. In my opinion, I like to see Jamie McMurray go full-time in the booth, maybe replace Clint Boyer. I get that Clint Boyer has been a big part of Fox for a long time. I think this will be Clint's 5th year. Next year will be his 4th or 5th year with the Fox team on a full-time basis. But I really like to see Jamie McMurray replace Clint Boyer. But it's interesting to hear that Fox is looking to have maybe a sometimes four-man boost. Hopefully Kevin Harvick come in there though, and shake things up. Because Fox Sports, in my opinion, has done a terrible job with their commentary over the last few years. And I feel like it's getting worse and worse and worse. They don't have energy. They don't have excitement. Hopefully Kevin Harvick can get some of that energy back in the booth and actually show what's going on the racetrack and pay attention to what's happening on the racetrack because, in my opinion, like I said, I do believe that Kevin Harvick will actually help the Fox Sports team just a little bit because, like I said, they have been struggling. They've been really, really bad, and they've been struggling over the last few years. I think Kevin Harvick is going to play a role in really helping that out. So we'll see what happens going forward, but it sounds like there's going to be multiple people in the booth and maybe some special guests, which I think is very, very interesting. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch. As Kyle Busch spoke to the media before the weekend on Saturday, and he says that NASCAR should have a What an Idiot award after seeing the 14 counterfeit part. He talked about the fact that basically that we've been seeing a lot of penalties come out, and he says that teams are basically going to get caught and eventually everyone's going to get sent to the R&D center. I completely agree with Kyle Busch, at least on this aspect. Obviously, he apparently doesn't watch Door Bumper Clear, though. If you hear the What an Idiot award, they have that on the Door Bumper Clear podcast. But I don't think Kyle Busch is completely wrong here. I think Kyle Busch, absolutely, in fact, is almost right here because if you look what's been going on, especially with the parts stuff and the penalties, it seems like on a week-by-week basis, we are talking about penalties in this sport. And to be honest, it gets tiring and really frustrating. These teams were told, and basically said, told NASCAR, save us from ourselves. Well, these teams keep pushing the boundaries and they keep end up getting caught and getting handed huge penalties. We have seen, I think, at least a quarter or almost 10 of the teams already penalized. All 400 cars have gotten penalized at one point this season, though some of them have gotten their points back. Eric Jones most recently got a pretty big penalty. We've seen Colleague Racing get a penalty at some point this year. Stewart Haas Racing's gotten a pretty big penalty. And also Austin Dillon has gotten a penalty, which of course is Kyle Busch's teammate. There has to be something done and something addressed about this because it's getting frustrating as a fan of the sport to see all this going on. In NASCAR, I really appreciate their transparency. We'll talk about that in a second. But overall, Kyle Busch, in my opinion, is right, and these teams need to stop pushing the boundaries as much. I get you want to push the boundaries because innovation is there, but in my opinion, the innovation is almost gone at this point with the next-gen car, and teams need to be a little better when it comes to that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the number 14 car. As we just talked about with the Kyle Busch stuff, NASCAR actually did some very really cool and awesome transparency where they actually showed the counterfeit part to the media and showed it to the online as well. The part that Chase Briscoe's team got penalized for. Can't remember exactly what they got penalized for exactly, but they showed that part. One of the things I really love here is the transparency. NASCAR did say when they had the big Hendrick penalties and all that stuff that they were eventually going to start being a little more transparent with the sport and with the media as well. And honestly, I think they have just been doing that here. You obviously know that the transparency is there, and I think that's a big thing with NASCAR is, like I said, for a long time now, NASCAR have been struggling to be transparent with their fans. But now you've got an example of a way that they are being a lot more transparent with their fan base. And I love this. I love it. They're showing the parts. They're bringing it back to racetrack. Because back in the late 90s and early 2000s, especially in 2001, they would have so many parts of illegal things you're not allowed to modify and you're not allowed to touch, so teams could not get in trouble for that. Them showing these parts is going to stop a lot of the issues because we've seen so many teams get penalties this year, and I love the fact that they're being transparent with everybody here. I think this is a great thing that they're doing. I love it. They're showing the things that are illegal, and I think overall this is a very, very cool thing that they're doing, and I absolutely love the fact that they're doing this. It's really awesome and really great that they're doing this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Chase Elliott. Now, Chase Elliott spoke to the media this week, and of course, this was his first race back since basically what happened in the Coke 600. And he already had spoken to media a little bit earlier in the week, but he spoke to Bob Pockers and multiple members of the media. And Chase Elliott basically said that everyone makes mistakes, and we all have to learn from those mistakes. Obviously, Chase Elliott had been suspended for right rear and Denny Hamlin down the straightaway with the Coke 600. He got the same penalty that Bubba Wallace got last year after Las Vegas when Bubba Wallace right rear Kyle Larson down the straightaway, and he got a one-race suspension, and that cost him a lot of points. Chase Elliott obviously has missed a lot of races here as well. He missed basically 6 other races because of an injury from a snowboarding accident that happened in Aspen, Colorado. And I do agree that everyone makes mistakes. I think for Chase Elliott, this is the low point of his NASCAR career up to this point because we haven't seen Chase Elliott do a lot of stupid stuff, things like this. So seeing him do something stupid was really, really frustrating. However, I will give him props for at least owning up to it. I don't think he even apologized for it. He said, I feel bad that I put my guys in a position that I put him in. But he didn't really apologize to Denny Hamlin. He said he was glad that Denny Hamlin was okay. But overall, he didn't really give an apology out to Denny Hamlin. He was just glad that Denny Hamlin was all right and okay. So it's very interesting to see for sure. And honestly, just hear Chase Elliott's kind of speak to the media is really, really good to see too. Chase Elliott did make up quite a few points past week at Sonoma. He's obviously pretty much now in a must-win situation unless he can make up a lot of points at Nashville and also at the road courses too. It seems like Chase Elliott's a better road course racer than the guys behind him like Daniel Suarez and Alex Bowman. So I do believe that we're going to see some work done, and hopefully things can be moved going forward so we can see Chase Elliott move on from this and get things going straight to fix up and get back into the championship hunt. He's obviously likely going to have to win a race, which I think is going to be really, really tough. Nonetheless, it's really, really good to see that Chase Elliott spoke to the media about this, and hopefully he can move on from this, and we all can move on from this and start looking toward the future. Hopefully we can start doing that going forward. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, Kurt Busch was spotted in 2311 Racing, put out a tweet, and it showed that Kurt Busch was checking out the Bubba Wallace pit box. He was on number 23 pit box, obviously, like I said, course driven by Bubba Wallace, and Kurt Busch on the pit box, checking everything out. Obviously, Kurt Busch is still currently at 23XI Racing, basically working as a coach and a driving coach for a team in some aspect of basically being a guy that's been a huge advisor for 23XI Racing. Kurt Busch at this point has still not been medically cleared to return to the racetrack, but he has said and spoken to the media that he has said that he's still currently working toward his plans to get back to the racetrack really, really soon and wants to get back to the Cup Series track as soon as possible. He has to first get medically cleared to have that opportunity and a shot to get back behind the wheel. Obviously, Kurt Busch, though, is still playing a huge role in 23XI Racing, and I think he's been a huge part in why we've been seeing 23XI Racing take huge improvements since last year. You look at both Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick this season. Tyler Reddick already has a win so far in 2023 at COTA. I thought he'd be a contender at Sonoma, but he wasn't a contender at Sonoma. And Bubba Wallace had a really great stretch of finishing in the top 12 in all but like one race for like 6 or 7 races there. I know he basically did have a couple not so great runs recently, but I think Bubba Wallace is in a much better position. Now he's still 26 points above the cutoff line, and we're going to Nashville, where if you remember last year, Bubba Wallace had a lot of great pace and a lot of great speed. But going back and talking about Kurt Busch, I think a lot of us fans do miss seeing Kurt Busch behind the wheel, and we really want Kurt Busch to come back and race in the NASCAR Cup Series. When will he return? Time will tell. My prediction is I think he's actually going to get back behind the wheel sooner than I think people realize. My guess, it could be in the next couple of weeks. We're not sure. But again, like I said, he's still working toward it. He's not medically cleared. I do think he comes back very, very soon. We'll have to wait and see when that does end up happening. Hopefully he comes back really, really soon, because I think a lot of his fans do miss seeing Kurt Busch, and hopefully he does make a return in the near future back to the NASCAR Cup Series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Garage 56. Now, I did a little bit of a video talking about Garage 56 on Sunday after the race concluded, and I talked about how Garage 56 ended up finishing in 39th. Now, Garage 56 caught a lot of attention, not just from NASCAR fans and motorsports fans alike, but when you go on TikTok, a lot of the Garage 56 videos basically got millions of views, and a lot of people really saw us and were talking about this that aren't even NASCAR fans. We're talking about this Garage 56 entry. Now, Garage 56, their goal was to finish the race and try to make it all the last. Well, they did have an issue with the Transact, so they did have to repair that, but they were able to repair it, get back on the racetrack, and they ended up finishing in 39th place. Basically, a lot of laps done. They weren't going to get any more positions. Less leaders had some sort of issue, but at one point, they were inside the top 30. And it is really cool to see Garage 56 end up finishing, because I think it's only the third time in history that a car that was part of the Garage 56 entry innovation team basically was able to finish. So it's really great to see them get that done. And I think it accomplished its goal of a lot of things. Number one, it got on the world stage. It was faster than the GTE cars. Every GTE car, sometimes they get faster than LMP3 cars as well, which in my opinion is extremely impressive. You think about the future of this. There could be some things they could take from this Garage 56 entry and probably apply to the current next-gen car. If I'm not mistaken, they had a lot higher horsepower on this car, so they could easily, for sure, give an opportunity and a shot to maybe put some of that stuff on there. But like I said, you think about what this accomplished and how it basically came to the world stage. NASCAR basically going to the world stage, I think, is incredible. Hendrick Motorsports did a fantastic job. Jimmy Johnson, Mike Rockefeller, Jensen Button, I think all did an amazing job. And maybe in the future, we could see this car run maybe in 2024 once again. Maybe it's a GTE car, or maybe just maybe somehow they can find a way to get like a team in the LMP1 class. I might be exaggerating here, the hypercar class. But still, and talking about the viewership as well, 160,000 people tuned in on Motor Trend, which is a 59% increase according to what Adam Stern tweeted out, which I think is a huge increase. Yes, only 160,000 is not a huge number, but again, a lot of people don't have Motor Trend. It's harder to watch. And I think a lot of people were tuning in to Motor Trend because of Garage 56 entry. They want to see what they could do, and to see that car almost do as good as it did was really, really incredible and amazing to see. So nonetheless, I love it. I was excited about it, and I love the fact that Garage 56 was part of this, and amazing stuff for sure to see Garage 56 end up complete the event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about global plans. Now, Adam Stern put out a tweet talking about Ben Kennedy said, and basically NASCAR's Le Mans entry is one part of the expanding global plans with execs making tries and over the world recently and evaluating opportunities in regions like the Middle East. Ben Kennedy said he's already starting to think about the 2025, 2026, and 2027 schedules. Now, obviously, there is one potential we're going to see some international racing on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, and it sounds like Montreal is on the verge of making a return as early as 2024, potentially replacing Auto Club. We talk about global plans. NASCAR is doing what all other sports are doing right now, and is that they are looking at going global and going international. You think about all other sports. Formula One in particular, they've been expanding a lot in the United States, but they've been expanding to other countries and other regions as well. Look at the NFL. Well, NFL is one of the most American sports out there. They've been expanding out to countries like Germany and Mexico, and also basically expanding to London as well. MLB, they've been expanding to Mexico and also expanding to London as well. A lot of other companies and a lot of other sports right now are expanding. I think NASCAR is looking at what all the other sports are doing. Hell, even recently, we've heard rumblings that IndyCar is going to also expand internationally. Rumors that it could be Argentina or another country that we're not entirely sure about. But still, globally, you've got to go global if you want the sport to succeed, I think, long term. As much as I think a lot of people are going to be against NASCAR going global, I actually am for it, especially if we can bring a lot of the international presence and maybe, just maybe, bring some new manufacturers into sport. Manufacturers that we really don't talk about a lot, like Ferrari. Maybe bring other ones for like Japan. Maybe bring in Hyundai. Maybe bring Mitsubishi. Maybe bring Acura. Maybe bring others like Mercedes in the NASCAR. I think NASCAR expanding globally would be really, really cool. Now, obviously, NASCAR, I think, still needs to focus on the racing product on the racetrack, but I think expanding globally has to be something that NASCAR is looking at right now, and I think it is a good move for NASCAR to go ahead and expand globally. I think it will be very successful for the sport long term. I think you will see things happen. Now, my question is, what tracks could they go to if they expand globally? Obviously, you're going to see them basically stay in the normal tracks that they are currently staying at the moment right now in the United States. But I imagine first, like I said, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, it sounds like they're going to go there. There's rumblings and rumors that Mexico City, the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track, could return in the 2024 schedule. That's a very big possibility. And obviously, they could expand outside and go to Europe and even go to Japan. Now, will that happen right away? I don't think so, but I think in the next few years, I think it's going to be really, really possible. And I think things are going to change long term. Like I said, I love the fact that NASCAR is looking internationally. I know a lot of people disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. I understand if you disagree with me on that. But I think NASCAR expanding its global presence will be a really, really good move for the sport long term. Short term, maybe not as much, but I think long term, the sport will be in a really, really good and a great position, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2024 schedule. Now, Jordan Bianchi did a mailbag section, talk about a lot of things, including the TV deal, but also talk about some things that could happen in the 2024 schedule. And it sounds like there could be some pretty big significant changes that are coming. While nothing is set at this moment, these are some of the changes that could end up happening. The first one is that North Wilkesboro could take the Bristol spring date. Obviously, Bristol, which has been on Easter. It sounds like, though, that Easter weekend will still be around, but North Wilkesboro will take that Bristol spring date. I know there's been rumors about the All-Stars maybe staying with North Wilkesboro in 2024, but it sounds like after success of what we saw this year with the All-Star event, how many people showed up, I would imagine a lot of people, including myself, really want a points-paying event, and maybe the Xfinity Series could go there as well. Next, it sounds like the Breakout 400 could be returning as early as 2024. We've heard this from multiple people that rumors and rumblings have been circulating that the Breakout 400 could return as early as the 2024 season. I know that basically ended on bad terms in 2020, went to the Indy Road Course, but I think a lot of people, especially myself, have grown tired of the Indy Road Course, and we've seen the next-gen car race really good at tracks like Pocono, which are very similar to tracks like Indianapolis, where I think the racing will be really, really good at the Breakout 400 track, or be better. If it's not, hey, at least we tried it. Or they could alternate a year by year where they have 1 year on the Brickyard track and 1 year on the Indy Road Course track. But I think it sounds very likely that Breakout 400 could end up returning. Next, there could be potential talk of the Charlotte Oval coming back for 2 Charlotte Oval races instead of 1. We see, as much as I have been a big fan of the Charlotte Oval track, I'm going to make, when you look at the TV ratings and you look at the racing, last year's racing was not very good in my opinion. It was one of the worst road races, one of the worst road course races I think I've ever seen in the 15 or 16 years I have been a fan of this sport. I think the Charlotte racetrack is one of the best tracks when it comes to next-gen product, and if they go back to the Oval, I think you're going to have a really compelling cutoff race and a better cutoff race as well. the intermediate tracks have produced some really good racing. But the last thing he notes is I believe Circuit Gilles Villeneuve could be taking the Auto Club day. Now, obviously, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve will not basically be the second race of the year, won't be the beginning year because Canada gets cold at that time, but it could be moved to later in the year and maybe take the Chicago Street date as well. And we could see other tracks come back in 2024. Obviously, one of the goals for 2024 schedule, there may not be as many changes, but it sounds like there could be some big changes coming as well. I think there's also a really strong chance of possibly that Chicago Street Course could be a one-and-done deal, which honestly, as much as I love the NASCAR is trying to street courses, I've not been a big fan of it because Road America got taken away, which I would love to see Road America get the opportunity and a shot to come back as well. That being said, it's very interesting to see. It sounds like there's a lot of stuff that could be set in stone here very, very soon when it does come to the 2024 schedule. I hope NASCAR does make some changes to the 2024 schedule. Again, some people think it's going to be stagnant, but it sounds like when it also comes to the 2024 schedule, it sounds like August is the timetable of trying to get it done, but it also got to work on the TV deal, which a lot of them, it sounds like the Amazon and NBC, they're going to come back on, and also Fox is going to be on the next TV deal, and that deal could be done within the next month, and then NASCAR can work on the schedule, but they're already beginning to have discussions about the schedule, and I think it's very interesting to see that NASCAR is currently working on that schedule. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Greg Biffle. Now, Greg Biffle this weekend was at Sonoma Raceway doing some stuff with Sonoma Raceway. And Greg Biffle spoke to the media, and I believe Front Stretch for the people that covered it, Steven Stump kind of covered this as well. And Greg Biffle told the media that he is interested in returning to NASCAR if Portland is to get back on the schedule. And he also knows that he believes that Portland could host a Cup date and believes that NASCAR should host a Cup Series date at Portland Raceway in 2024. Now, Greg Biffle has raced in the last years. The last time Greg did race was last year in 2022, driving for NY Racing. But before that, he did make some select starts in 2019. He made his first Truck Series start in almost 15 years, ended up winning that Truck Series start, driving for Kyle Busch Motorsports. And also, Greg Biffle then the next year drove for GMS, I believe finished 17th at Darlington, or like 20th or 21st at Darlington. And then he came back in 2022 and drove for NY Racing. He only had one top 25 finish, but NY Racing wasn't the strongest organization. But it's really cool to see that Greg Biffle's interested in returning. Now, my question would be, is what team could Greg Biffle run for if he was returned, if Portland does come on the schedule next year? While there are a few opportunities in shots, what about Junior Motorsports? Junior Motorsports had the number 88 car, and obviously the 88 car doesn't run a lot of races, and it is a very competitive car. I think Dale is good friends with Greg Biffle as well, and Greg Biffle, I think, would be very competitive in the Xfinity Series. He hasn't made an Xfinity Series start, I think, in like 10 or 15 years, but it'd be really cool to see Greg Biffle come back there. What about other organizations? Somehow maybe like an SHR potentially. I'm not entirely sure. What about if Cup goes there? There could be some potential opportunities as well. So let's talk about that for a second. Portland hosting a Cup day, I think would be really, really cool. But if Cup Series goes there, what teams could he drive for there? What about Trackhouse Racing? Obviously, Trackhouse Racing, they are a team that, of course, they have that Project 91 car. I know that's meant for road course drivers, international drivers, but I imagine that Just Smarts would make an exception for Greg Biffle, because Greg Biffle, I think, would be really fun to have there. Just saying 69 would be a really cool number to have. But you also have other teams that could be a potential possibility. What about 2311 Racing? 2311 Racing has that third car, the 67 car, and they obviously know we're going to have that in a couple races this year. Would they bring that out, especially since Kurt is good friends with Greg Biffle? I would imagine they did have some history back in the mid-2000s. I'd imagine that there would be a good way for that to end up happening. But I would love to see Greg Biffle come back and race in NASCAR. We've been seeing a lot of drivers, especially recently, show interest in wanting to come back. We just had Ryan Newman make a return to NASCAR in this last year. He's going to make more starts here in 2023, make 3 or 4 starts later this year. You got other guys that have shown interest. Casey Kane spoke to the media. He said he's interested in returning to NASCAR. You've got other teams that have shown interest in wanting to return to drivers. Carl Edwards had expressed maybe some slight interest in wanting to come back. He says the more that he sees the sport, the more he does want to return. We've seen Jimmy Johnson come back to the sport, especially as of recently. And I think Tony Stewart's also points expressed interest in wanting to return to the sport as well. It's interesting to hear and great to see that drivers do want to come back and race in NASCAR. And I think, like I said, it'd be really fun and really great to see Greg Biffle come back and race in the sport. I don't think Greg Biffle will be the most competitive because Greg Biffle, let's be honest, if he comes back next year, he will be 55 years old at the end of that 2024 season. But still, I would love for Greg Biffle to have that shot and opportunity to come back and race in the sport. It'd be really, really fun and hope that we'd see Greg Biffle race. Obviously, the main goal is for Portland to be on the schedule next year. And if Portland does get on the schedule next year, I would imagine Greg Biffle will easily have an opportunity and a shot to race. So I hope it ends up happening. Hope Greg Biffle makes a return, and we'll see if he does decide to go ahead and make a return to NASCAR. Maybe he comes back in 2023. A lot of us fans do miss him. We all thought he'd be racing this year. It sucks he hasn't been able to race, but hopefully one day we see Greg Biffle make a return to NASCAR. Hopefully he does have a chance to return in the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs. Now, after Mark Truex Jr. won the NASCAR most recent race at Sonoma a couple days ago, Mark Truex Jr. picking up his 33rd career NASCAR Cup Series victory, Joe Gibbs was asked a question by Dustin Long in regards to competing against Kyle Busch. And basically, Joe Gibbs was asked what it's like to compete against Kyle Busch. Well, Joe Gibbs says something very, very interesting. He says it's not fun. We didn't want that, but it ended up happening. Obviously, at the beginning of last year, there was a lot of talk about the contract stuff where Kyle Busch had driven for Joe Gibbs Racing from 2008 up until the 2022 season. And obviously, at the end of 2022, Kyle Busch left Joe Gibbs Racing on basically kind of a cold shoulder after basically losing a sponsorship from M&M's. They had an opportunity to keep Kyle Busch with Oracle sponsorship, but Oracle basically dropped that sponsorship off. Therefore, he also had Joe Gibbs' grandson being Ty Gibbs, who was going to be a lot cheaper, and they made the decision to go ahead and basically cut Kyle Busch out of the team because he didn't bring the sponsorship and the funding. But we've seen Kyle Busch go over to Rich Choice Racing and been very, very successful and be more competitive. If you want my honest opinion, I don't think Kyle Busch was getting the best stuff over the last few years, and I think Kyle Busch was growing stagnant and growing tired of racing at Joe Gibbs Racing. And he goes over RCR, and already this season, look at Kyle Busch. I think he made the right decision to get out of JGR because Joe Gibbs Racing combined only has 4 wins this season. Look at Kyle Busch. He's already scored 3 wins this year. So I think Joe Gibbs made a major, major mistake of not keeping Kyle Busch. But it all comes down to the sponsorship and funding situation. Obviously, they lost that major sponsorship and major funding from M&M's. And when you don't have sponsorship funding, you lose that opportunity. And you look at RCR, they have a much different sponsorship role. I don't personally think they really wanted to keep Kyle. I'm just going to keep it frank because you got FedEx who's still committed working with Denny Hamlin. Likely they're going to get that done. And Joe has been more happy with having Mark Truex Jr. around. It sounds like Mark Truex Jr. is likely coming back. But I think losing Kyle Busch hurts them in the long run as well because they lose that Toyota development with KBM. But I think in the long term as well for Kyle Busch, I think this is going to help Kyle Busch's career. And you look at Kyle Busch, like I said already this year, 3 wins in the 2023 season. I think there's going to be more wins coming. And it wouldn't surprise or shock me if Kyle Busch ends up winning more races this year himself than what Joe Gibbs Racing did in 2023. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but obviously, you look at the sponsorship model from Joe Gibbs, they have a much different sponsorship model. But I think if they're going to survive long term when it comes to their sponsorship model, they obviously need to change up their sponsorship model long-term going forward because if they don't change it up going forward, they're going to lose more talented drivers and they're going to lose talent. I mean, look at Denny Hamlin. Until recently, we all thought Denny Hamlin, he was going to leave JGR. It sounds like that deal is likely to get figured out and is going to get done so Denny can stay long-term with Joe Gibbs. But I think that exposes the issues at Joe Gibbs Racing because no one ever thought that Kyle Busch was actually going to leave Joe Gibbs Racing. So for him to leave, it's really frustrating for that team. But I think Kyle Busch made the right decision and right call when it comes to his career. And obviously, I think a lot of people think that Joe, and even Joe even praised Kyle after the race because Kyle Busch is doing an incredible job this year. Like I said, Kyle Busch is a championship threat for the first time since 2019. And it wouldn't surprise or shock if Kyle Busch does go out and win the championship in the 2019 and 23 season. You look historically too, won 2015, 2019. So a lot of people think that Kyle Busch could go out this upcoming season and win the 2023 championship. Nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see what happens long term when it comes to Joe Gibbs Racing's future. They do have a good future for them, though. Ty Gibbs has been a pretty impressive rookie, and then obviously Christopher Bell, who has a long-term deal with the team. But it sounds like at least for the future, they will have their two older drivers, that being Martin Truex and Denny Hamlin, for at least maybe a couple more seasons. How good Martin Truex Jr. has been performing this year, I'd imagine he's not going anywhere anytime soon. And then obviously, you see what's going on with Denny Hamlin. He's got probably a few years left, which I think is going to benefit both Ty Gibbs and benefit Christopher Bell long term. And then whoever comes into the pipeline and comes into the deals, they'll probably have the opportunity to go as well. So it's really good to see. It sucks that basically people are talking about this, but it's good to see at least so that Joe knows it's not fun and it's interesting to hear for sure, in my honest opinion. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on if I win a video that does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are thoughts about Joe Gibbs' comments? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are thoughts about Greg Biffle potentially returning to NASCAR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm not sure if there's going to be another video today on the channel. I'm not promising that. There is going to be a video on the second channel, though, maybe likely today or tomorrow. Then tomorrow on the channel, there's going to be maybe a special video on the channel, maybe ranking all the tracks. I'm not sure. I'll probably put out a poll later today to decide what you guys want on the channel. Then on Friday, there should be a NASCAR news video on the channel. Then on Saturday, there should be something else on the channel as well. I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to wait and see. There's a lot of great content I that I think you're going to enjoy. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.